Hey, my fellow ruminators, welcome back to another series of my discussion. And notice I said ruminators, right? That's the word because everybody on this channel likes to think, right? And they like to reflect and to make wise decisions, right? And that's the purpose of this channel, to be able to think and to be reflective, to muse over topics and not to just accept people's words as they are, but we look beneath the surface of what they say or what they write or what they do. Right? It doesn't mean, therefore, that we are paranoid, but is that we are critical thinkers. And that is the purpose of this channel, to prod you to think. Now, today I saw an interesting article in the Guardian newspaper, that's the UK Guardian newspaper, which I'm not going to read the majority of it and bore you to death, but I shall share a little aspect of it with you. And this is, I wanted to just show you how the media operates. This is the title of the article is China supplies data to WHO about clusters of respiratory illness. So we're hearing again that there is some respiratory virus lurking its way in China. And guess what? It's affecting children, more so children than adults. Isn't that very interesting that the previous virus, affected more adults than children? Children had a minuscule, you know, the virus affected children on a minuscule scale in comparison to adults. We're not suggesting here that, children become sick, but many of them were not vulnerable to COVID-19. Now, I just wanted to read you something here. It says on November 13th, China's National Health Commission held a press conference about the increase in respiratory disease cases. The health authority said that these cases were linked to pathogens such as influenza and mycoplasma pneumoniae, a common bacterial infection that typically affects younger children. So parents have to be aware of that because we don't know when these things will come to our part of the world, right? So we have to be very careful. So they're talking, they were talking about that children are mostly affected, and they are also assuming that because the children were locked down, that their immune system might not be as strong as it should be had they been exposed to outdoors, pathogens during the lockdowns that we had about 4 years ago. So already we're seeing that children also, their immune systems are not as strong as they are supposed to be because they were locked in and they weren't exposed to viruses and other pathogens that could have helped them it could have helped their immune system to be stronger. One of the things that we ought to remember, we are human beings, right? And as long as this earth exists, we are going to have illnesses, we're going to have pathogens, we're going to have, what they call pandemics. It doesn't mean, therefore, that that should scare us. What we should ensure that we do is that we should seek to strengthen our immune system, right, by eating well, by having faith, right? You need to have some sort of faith in some higher being, right? I'm a Christian, so I have faith in God. It does help also to strengthen your immune system. Or exercise to get adequate sunshine, the correct use of water, among other things, we should be able to use to strengthen our immune systems. But having said all of that, this article that was written by the Guardian newspaper, notice in the last paragraph, this is how the media operate. It had to put, because, before I came to the last paragraph, I was saying to myself, where is the whole agenda of vaccines? Because I know that they cannot write an article without mentioning that the young people, the children, will have to be vaccinated. So whilst I was waiting with eager anticipation, I came across it in the last paragraph. Look at what they say. State media, that's referring to state media in China, has acknowledged the increase in pneumonia infections among children, but stressed that most cases are mild, that's good, and that parents should follow measures to reduce the risk of cases spreading, such as vaccinations, if necessary, regular hand washing, mask wearing, and staying at home when necessary or when ill. Look at what they have done here, right? And a lot of scientists have debunked a lot of the responses to the pandemic that we had in 2020. But it seems to me that they are certain that these are the measures that they will still take if another pandemic arrives on shores, right? So it means, therefore, parents, if this pandemic should reach our shores and many of our children are sickened, they are going to insist that your children be vaccinated. Just very interesting news. And I thought that I would share it with you because I thought that this was interesting given the fact that COVID-19 had not had much impact on negative impact that is on children, but this virus does. This respiratory illness does. Now, I'm going to make myself vulnerable this evening, right? And I having read this article today, let me close this window. Having read the article, I thought, I was a little bemused, a little perturbed by what I'd read, because in light of what happened in 2020, I beg your pardon, I think that we have to be vigilant, right? We can't afford to trust everything we read, and we've got to dig deeper. This is nothing to alarm us. It's just to make us concerned and to have our eyes open at all times. Now, I wrote this, it's rough. It's a rough draft, I must say. I just sat and wrote it after I'd read the article from the Guardian newspaper. I thought, why not just write something that's on your mind? So it took me about 15 minutes. I was sitting in a park and I said, let me write this. So it's rough. It's not even typed yet. And I don't think I'm going to type it up too. It's just a few thoughts I had on my mind. And I said, why not share it with my ruminators, right? My fellow ruminators. So you can judge and you can send me your reaction to this at a later time. Now, I want to thank all the individuals who, I just had 2 more subscribers. Thank you so much for having subscribed to my channel. I hope that you're sharing my messages, my videos with your friends and families and your co-workers and whomever you can share them with, so that we can grow our channel, we can grow our community, because the purpose is to grow our community so we can speak on diverse issues, right? Now, remember now that we are on a march, you might not believe it, to tyranny. This is not necessarily that we are marching to democracy, right? As they're telling us. They don't want our societies to be a democratic society, right? Our leaders that be, right, desire that our societies become more tyrannical. And daily we're seeing that. And I hope that you are not in this delusional, well, I should not think you are, because you are a ruminator, right? And that is what you do. You think, you reflect, and you cogitate, right? But listen to what I wrote, right? And you can give me your reaction. Not very good, right? It's just that something, just things I just wanted to, to pen, to write, right? Since sometimes you get very angry with what you read, and sometimes the best thing to do is to pen something in response to what you might have heard or what you might have read, right? Okay, good. So I said, so I might be looking down at times. About 4 years ago, death smells and aromas engulfed the atmosphere. And the death smell had to do with the COVID death smells. I should have made that clear. A novel virus had docked at international harbors, anxiously awaiting hosts in whose bodies it could plant its vitriolic and venomous stings. First, the deadly virus decided that it would pervade China, a country deemed amenable to wide-scale lockdowns among a platitude of other totalitarian measures. The virus was indeed accurate. China met its deadly adversary with full-scale lockdowns, which resulted in the virus not having sufficient host to invade. So we decided to traverse to international communities, particularly the West, where it was adamant it could revolutionize the political and techno-scientific landscape. After all, there was much damage it could wreak in China, as the majority of the Chinese, I should say that after all, there was not much damage, I should say. There was not much damage it could wreak in China, as the majority of the Chinese population was amenable and acclimated to the Marxist ideology of totalitarianism. So they were already comfortable. Well, at least they had become acclimated. I shouldn't say they're comfortable or they were comfortable, but that is what they do. And I think many of them had become accustomed to that, political philosophy of Marxism. There were just a few anti-science dissidents whom it quickly obliterated with the mighty arm of the state. Ironically, dissident doctors and scientists who questioned the excessiveness and authoritarian policies of the government received their just compensation of physical, social, and economic alienation, and at times physical death was an effective cure for this contrived and manufactured disease. Second, Western countries, largely or previously considered to be sanctuaries of liberal democracy, were its next target. That's the virus' next target. Mr. COVID, which eventually became Dr. COVID, was diffident in exposing the Western world with its totalitarian infection. However, to his utmost surprise, that's the virus's utmost surprise, most of the Western world was receptive of its intoxicating airborne malady, not to mention its revolutionary demeanor to inflict totalitarian principles upon a bemused and brainwashed Western society. Third, after the warm welcome by narcissistic governments, that's narcissistic Western government in the West, who despite the dangers of contracting the deadly stings of COVID-19, were willing to sacrifice their prized lives upon the altar of politics, economic aggrandizement. Many, for the first time, anchored their faith, trust, and confidence into the bewitching art of modern science. Since the Honorable Dr. COVID's arrival to the Western world in March, that was on March, I should say, of 2020, Western societies have been transformed into depressed, anxious, and disease-prone societies. And if you have been listening to people like Dr. John Campbell, he has been reporting that the whole the cases of anxieties in Western societies around the world have been, going up, right? Have been augmenting. So, and some people or some scientists are suggesting that this was also a result of the lockdowns, right? Because remember now that the lockdowns were really long. They went beyond the 2 weeks, that they had told us that they wanted to get some handle on the nature of the virus that was lurking in the world. Nevertheless, the economic boom, which the top 1% of the global elites amassed, was unprecedented in history. With all of this prosperity for the few at the expense of the suffering for the masses, the global elites are saddened by the departure of Mr. or Dr. COVID-19. Thus, they were waiting with bated breath and eager anticipation for another respiratory health emergency in which they can use an illness to enrich and empower themselves. Even Mr. COVID, who was later given the name Dr. COVID by me, now the Honorable Dr. COVID, right? The Honorable Dr. COVID, given that most of our elite Western universities, for example, Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford, have conferred upon him honorary doctorates of medicine. So let me read this paragraph again so that you can get the gist of what I was saying. I think that I had some glitches there, linguistic glitches there, right? Thus, they are waiting with bated breath and eager anticipation for another respiratory health emergency in which they can use an illness to enrich and empower themselves. Even Mr. COVID, now the Honorable Dr. COVID, given that most of our elite Western universities, for example, Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford, have conferred upon him honorary doctorate or doctorate, of medicine. Now, so he's now officially Dr. COVID-19. Now, what can we expect from another global health emergency, aka pandemic? Our global political and economic elites lament the back to normal realities of a healthy population who have gone about their own businesses, right? Because they have power. They don't have the power that they had during the pandemic. So they do lament some of these emergency strategies. The question is, when will our politicians welcome and crown another respiratory disease? Will they resurrect the WHO endorsed totalitarian sanitary policies by inflicting more tyrannical forms of governmental policies upon Western society or societies? So this was something I wrote. It's rough. I edited it there because it was a sort of reflection, right? This was nothing that I'm going to write. It could be refined to be published, but I just thought of writing it down and in light of what I'd read from the UK Guardian newspaper. So I'm not going to spend a long time tonight with you. Thank you so much for joining. I hope to see you in another chat. Okay, all the best to you, my ruminating friends. I hope to see you. Remember now, please like, subscribe, and share this information with as many people as possible, that our channel, that our community can grow and we can be proud of, we can be defenders of truth and freedom in a world that is moving towards the opposite direction, moving in the opposite direction. Thank you so much for joining. All the best.